Welcome to Bring Back BlackBerry, the show that's not about nostalgia, but about building the next generation of purposeful mobile tech.
Because look, it's 2025 and the world doesn't just need another phone. Maybe, just maybe, it needs a little more choice.
Totally agree, Jeff. But before we introduce you, let's talk about me. I'm CrackBerry Kevin, founder of the Bring Back BlackBerry movement, and the guy crazy enough to try to get on BlackBerry's board of directors. Because you know what? I think the community already owns the BlackBerry brand. We just don't own the trademarks yet, and we're going to try to make that happen.
And I'm Jeff Gadway, former BlackBerry product marketing lead, now co-founder of Clicks. Together, we're exploring what it'll really take to bring back the spirit of BlackBerry.
I've been looking forward to this one because honestly, ever since we announced the Bring Back BlackBerry movement, I've been getting tweets and DMs and emails from people saying, Kevin, you can't just put a BlackBerry logo on the back of a BlackBerry with Android and call it a BlackBerry, because BlackBerry stood for so much more. So today we're bringing in somebody, Petter Neby, with us, and we're going to talk about the future of what a BlackBerry operating system solution can look like, because he's been working on something that I think checks a lot of the boxes, ticks a lot of the marks. What's the saying? It checks the boxes. But before we talk future, I think we kind of need to look back at the past. Let's rewind.
I think that's totally fair. I mean, if you really look back at the original BBOS, it was basically a two-way pager. I mean, think of those RIM 950s. It had like, 2 or 3 lines of text. You could do a very limited things. And that's what eventually evolved into the modern smartphones that we all knew and loved. It was built for efficiency, better battery life, better data compression, that magical push email experience that liberated people from their desks.
Yeah, and I almost think it was unfair. Like in a way, somebody like BlackBerry becomes victims of their own success because they inspire everybody who follows, and they get the advantage of not starting on building on a two-way pager, but literally putting a computer into your hand. So BlackBerry had some decisions to make, and I think we'll have to save for another episode the handful of decisions they could have made where we'd be living in a alternate reality universe where BlackBerry's still on top. But they didn't. And what they did is they started working on BlackBerry 10, their new operating system platform, built around QNX, a company they acquired that was known in industry as having this rock-solid microkernel with a lot of beneficial features. They bought that. You were there at the time, Jeff. And then they spent a lot of time building out I guess you'd call it like the UI and all the services and even the app ecosystem layer on top of all that. But what kind of killed it? Like, I know my take. It's one word. It's really short. But I'm kind of wondering why, we're in this reality and not that alternate universe. What's your take on it?
Oh man, this again could go a lot deeper here. I think people give too simple an answer for too complex a question. But I think where people really get it twisted is that when we talk about bringing back BlackBerry, we're not talking about relaunching BB10. Those days are done and gone. The infrastructure's been wound down. The IP no longer exists. The people are no longer there to build it and support it. The servers are gone. The economics of running something like that are impossible. And so that's not what this is about.
Well, but the thing is, even if you could do it, I don't think you'd want to, because you'd still have the same problem of why it didn't work before. Don't have the apps.
Precisely.
Right?
Yeah.
If you resurrected BB10 from the dead, not going to happen. But if you did, can I run, I don't know, Instagram, TikTok, and whatever other app of the day people want on it? If it's not supported, doesn't solve the problem. You still have this compromised experience.
Right. And I think this is where people's nostalgia gets the better of them, right? When they see that logo, they immediately think keyboards. But what we know is that when they get their hands on a device, especially one with a BlackBerry logo on it, they expect a lot more than just a button phone experience. They expect privacy. They expect security. They expect mobile communication that's unprecedented and unrivaled. They expect productivity. It's that hardware plus software stack working together that delivers the BlackBerry magic.
100%. I mean, I'm not saying like there's a lot of customers on the planet, a lot of consumers on the planet who are obviously completely fine not having that today. They're, I like to say selling their digital souls when they start using an Android device and power the ad industry. And now you're just training algorithms and AI models. But I think you're right. Like if ultimately we were able to get the BlackBerry license and bring a solution to market, and I use the word solution really intentionally because just a phone with, I think, Android or Google Android, maybe you could do that version as a consumer version, but you wouldn't have really brought it back unless there was something working together, hardware and software combined that live up to those pillars that made BlackBerry BlackBerry, as you described.
100%. What's needed is something that goes deeper than surface, something that's built on an Android kernel, yes, so that it can run all the apps and deliver that full platform experience, but it needs a completely reimagined ethos around those core pillars of what I call the spirit of BlackBerry, those attributes that I listed off a minute or two ago. And that's what a modern BBOS would truly require in order to both be competitive in today's environment and also tap into what it was that made it so special.
Love it. And that's why we have the perfect guest with us on today's episode.
Introducing
Petter Neby.
Petter Neby, founder and chairman of Apostrophy, a Swiss technology company building AphyOS. And let me get this right. Tell me if I've got this right. AphyOS is a privacy-first, non-big tech mobile operating system.
You got it right. Perfect. Perfect.
And I gotta just interject here. I technically co-founded it with you, right? I mean,
yeah. Well,
I believed in Aphy so much when it first kind of came to me as a concept back in early 2022, I think. 20 late. You're
21.
Probably starting at 2021,
sure.
and when it was still in the project mode, I guess. And then as it was, you planted the flag and said, "Let's turn this into a company." I joined the team as, I got to sign as a co-founder, but really first money in, because putting my money into having an alternative, like really planting the flag to build that BlackBerry 10 successor. That's something that I've seen the void in the market since BB10 went away. And there's nothing consumer friendly that's been out there that has a chance of gaining traction until I think, what we're trying to accomplish with Apostrophy. So Petter, thanks for joining the show today. And I think we should dig into it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So Apostrophe is based in Switzerland, where its entire tech stack and infrastructure effectively lives. Now, I'm assuming that's a very intentional choice on your part to kind of do a flank around the gravitational pull of big tech. Is that accurate?
Fundamental, I would say, of course. And well, I would, thank you for having me here, first of all. And since we were sat in my kitchen and we were crazy enough to get it going, I think, of course, there's a reason why you invited me here, other than Kevin thought it was really important to be part of this. It's really about we take, we have, of course, the experience of BlackBerry and the legacy of BlackBerry, as you, Jeff, mentioned, all of these things that we really care about. And we're not doing so many things different from a concept point of view. We build it very differently. But of course, we also put that Swissness on top of that. And that Swissness is really, really important because, hey, in today's world, geopolitics, you name it, or a place that actually have proven more than 500 years, you have a constitutional right to your privacy.
That's awesome. I mean, I want to dive into all that, but I know Kevin's got a very pressing question before we do.
Well, it's the Bring Back BlackBerry podcast. So the test is, I know the phone you're using right now is the Punkt MCO2, which was the first OEM to launch with AphyOS. What were you using before you started building mobile devices at Punkt? Because you also have the really neat smaller MPO1, MPO2 device, which I have one of those. That was kind of my first digital disconnect device back in 2021, where I got a little too addicted to the iPhone and I went cold turkey on it. But what were you using before that led you to actually wanting to build Apostrophe?
Listen, think it's really, the last phone I had was a BB10. It was a
Q10. Okay.
Q10 was so since Q10 stopped functioning, I've been living what you call your detox
Right.
phone. I've been living that as my primary phone ever since, until not me, but we managed to build Apostrophe, and I could be back and having, basically that tool that we all depend upon in this world.
And what I've been so impressed with you is just how uncompromising you are when it comes to your personal stance around privacy, data ownership, and what happens with your the digital version of the Petter is sitting before me here.
Yeah, well, you have to live as you preach, right? If not, who would? Well, I wouldn't go. And it's a pretty fundamental. So yeah.
So,
Thank you.
given that your last kind of BlackBerry experience was the Q10, if we think back to BlackBerry 10 at that time, it kind of had it all, right? It had a multitasking UX, which, funny enough, was ahead of its time. And as we look at modern OSs now, whether it's iOS or Android, they've kind of embraced a lot of those same gesture-based controls,
absolutely.
things like peek and all of that kind of stuff. So it had that. But if you had to sum up why BlackBerry failed in, let's say, one word, what would it be?
Well, apps, obviously. It's all about apps. If you can't access, all the apps that the universe has to offer, you have no choice.
You're totally right. And sometimes I don't understand how history forgot that, because every now and then I'll come across a commenter who blames the keyboard on the downfall of BlackBerry. And I'm like, no, that accidentally got, the baby got tossed out with the bathwater.
The buttons got tossed out.
The buttons absolutely got tossed out. But it was really an app thing. If you can't have a complete ecosystem around you, you just feel like you're kind of compromised in what you're holding in your hand compared to other options on the market. But what I want to know is, if you're launching a modern QWERTY device in 2026, why would not just building a QWERTY phone that runs Google Android be okay from Petter's point of view?
Well, first of all, then you shouldn't take the BlackBerry logo and put it on it, because it's not in line with the spirit of the BlackBerry that we are all talking about. It's the whole stack of what BlackBerry stood for, of course. So I think that's fundamentally so. I mean, again, going back to Jeff, it's all about control, privacy, productivity. These are the elements that we endorsed and want to have back.
And we can't forget that from a business standpoint, any OEM, original equipment manufacturer, that's using Google mobile services is also like locked in to update cycles, software update requirements, fees that they got to pay, all sorts of restrictions too, right?
Yeah. Well, society does not have much choice. Neither do they. If your job is to build nice, good, well-working hardware, which choice do you actually have? I mean, it's long since Android without the Google Android that actually an OEM could base upon Android and actually deliver a relatively good experience. That's AOS P11. That's, 7 years ago.
It's really a good point too, because what we witnessed in the last decade of the rise of Android was also a lot of OEMs who made great hardware disappear from the space because they couldn't hit the volume needed to keep up with all these requirements from Android. So if I think about HTC, who made great hardware, LG, who was making some really fun mobile devices and smartphones, what happens? Well, every year, Google releases a new version of Android with Google mobile services. And then these guys all have to rush to take their UI enhancements, because they want to own their experience with their users a bit, rush for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months to get that to market for their new hardware at extreme expense, extreme stress, and then do it again every single year to keep up with what Google and Android keeps putting out to stay toe-to-toe with iOS. And it becomes this vicious cycle that really works against them. And then you think about security updates. For anybody who's not a massive player, they typically have fallen off in the world of Google because there was no ROI on doing those updates, because you always have to sell the next new device you just invested in.
Yeah, hearing Kevin talk about this, it reminds me of I don't know if you've heard of this Kevinism before, Petter.
No, tell me.
He only has a couple, right? No, but one that I love and I think is a good reminder here is that until you have a shared language, you can't have a dialogue, you can't have a discussion. And I think something that a lot of people fail to understand is that there's a distinction between Google Android and Google, or like GMS as it's known to people in the industry, and they're not actually the right thing. Can you help kind of clear up that distinction and where, there's openness in Android AOSP versus et cetera? Yeah.
I think it's so important, and it's shocking. We have been traveling within the industry for some years, and not even within the industry themselves, they are absolutely not clear and understanding the differences between the two. So we all know, and we all have a sense of that little green figure, and that is a sign of something open source that everyone can contribute and make use of, etc. And of course, then there was Google coming in and being a major sponsor of that, which was the first stage of Google taking control of Android. And of course, you could not, they could not eat it completely, so they had to, because even Google rely on open source contributions. So therefore, what they have practically done over the years is that fundamentally open source builds, and we make sure that they build well, and that's great. And then we wrap the Google items around it, and I will ship it over to that device manufacturer, and he will make use of it. And what therefore this means is that Google Android means that you sign up to practically the Google Play Store. You have to have the Google Play Store, the mother of all data leaking things that ever has been created. Okay.
Interesting. So if I'm hearing you right, and I mean this kind of gets into what's at the crux of Apostrophy and AphyOS and the philosophy behind it, it's not that we're being anti-Google, it's that we're giving people an alternative to how their data, or to use Kevin's expression, which I love, their digital soul gets accessed and managed.
Yeah. I like that digital soul thing.
You should steal it.
Yeah, well, it needs to come from the guy who created it.
I don't know if I did or didn't. I feel like it's just an obvious word. I'll take credit till somebody says, "Oh, you didn't start that, Kevin. Somebody else did." But I like it, and I think it's very representative of the existential crisis we have between our real selves and digital selves.
Oh, so I mean, going back to the question, truly, no, we are not about, there's so much great stuff that we rely on and make use of every day that comes from Google. But it's just, is it okay that there is only that choice? Because truly, we say it's a duopoly, but truly, okay, Apple aside, that's one pair of shoes, but then you have to wear the whole outfit as well, right? Google is another pair of shoes, okay, and you can kind of dress it up the way you fancy. However, that's the reality of today. In the world, it's the biggest consumer market in the world. It's the most important infrastructure of society. So that's not okay. And if we just sat here idle and we thought, we would be very ignorant human beings accepting that there cannot be other ways to do this.
Yeah. I think what is really interesting to me is if we think about BlackBerry, and let's say somehow they magically solved their app problem a decade ago and they were still here today, I feel like we would see a market split between iOS, Google Android, and a BlackBerry solution that would be more like 40-40-20.
Yeah.
But because similar to the PC world where, it became a PC Mac game and now in mobile it became an iOS or Android game, it feels like that became a 50-50. And it's too hard for other projects to date to really gain the critical mass needed to even move, a percentage point up from 0 to 1. But I think the approach that we're taking here, where it's, the goal is to have several OEM partners, to have something consumer friendly out of the box where I'm not, rooting my Google Pixel to load something else up on it that starts as a blank slate experience. That makes sense. And eh, it's like tech is cyclical, but it feels like more than even when BlackBerry was in the game, what they stood for back then is more relevant and important now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it feels like some of the structural, foundational decisions that the team made in launching or building AphyOS were very deliberate and intentional. They're not by accident. It's not by accident that your infrastructure and your data and your compliance all sits in Switzerland. It's by design. Talk about why that's so foundational to Aphy and being able to be that alternative to the duopoly that exists that you talked about.
Yeah, well, again, we talk about cycles in technology. Let's start from the basis, the platform of Switzerland. It's neutral by design, and it's been proven very respectful of privacy for more than 700 years, so at least more than 500 years. I don't really remember my history now. At least 500 years. It is carved into the constitution of Switzerland, and therefore actually it works. You don't need to design an app for that. It just works. That's why it's there. And yeah.
Well, that makes sense. And so that's sort of like the infrastructure component. But for people who are new to AphyOS, what is it under the hood, right? Like, is it Android? Is it, we've talked about graphene before. Like, what is it under the hood?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is Android-based. We earlier spoke about what is the difference between AOSP, so Android Open Software Project, which is what anyone can go out and do some cooking with and create something nice to serve. And that's only one part of it. And of course, there's no way to get around that. And actually, I don't think you should, because again, that's the open source. However, without all the infrastructure elements that actually makes that thing work, you need to do some piping. And so that's really where you start to do the boring things that we don't want to think about because it just needs to work. So that is, all the classical, ensuring that the securities come up, the OTA. Think of this. Earlier, the thing about emergency call, which is a fundamental, it's a certain, you can't sell a phone without a emergency number. That sits in Google Android. It doesn't sit in the AOSP.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're talking about, that's just a small drop. But if there are 19 different of those drops, it's a lot of, it's a major undertaking to create that platform, the infrastructure to make it work, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, and kind of going off script here for a second, but as you talk about that, as you both have shared with me what really makes Apostrophe OS special, something that struck me, and I never thought about it because I'm an iOS guy and it's not the same on Android, but there's protection in terms of safeguarding your information holistically relative to Google mobile services, but then like app level control to be able to say on an app by app basis, how much access do I want to give? And so there's so many more levers that, you've built into this approach that not only guards that, data sovereignty, but gives you as a user more control over who gets access to your data and what they can do with it.
Yeah, and I think that analogy is truly, I believe is relative to life, right? You tune into things, you eat that much pasta or you stop eating that pasta, right? And that goes to, if you happen to really need TikTok, probably Kevin, but,
Guilty.
Guilty. But point is that, it's okay. Go in there and go full, serve yourself from the buffet, but then switch it off. That's what we do, out in the real world.
And choose to have a relationship with that specific service, not that Google is seeing, hey, Kevin, you're spending 7.5 hours a day on TikTok. when you're at this location, and 40 minutes on Instagram and 3 hours in your
Yeah,
email
exactly.
to build this profile on me that powers their entire monetization engine.
And to your point, Jeff, it's really that's where we go in under the hood, right? So what's going on underneath all of that? Because truly, if you have a Google Android phone and you kind of can control a little bit how much data is going to leak through that, Google will never allow you to stop that leakage.
And this sort of starts to get us back to the BlackBerry ethos, right? Having this foundational approach. And I can see Kevin's wheels turning and imagining, okay, well, what if we were able to get the green light from BlackBerry on accessing the brand?
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, I want to know what happens next if we actually make this happen, which I'm going to make happen or die trying, right? I'm saying that a little too often. It feels a little, but
well,
I think
you put it in our scripts as like the sign off, right?
Yeah, that is it. Okay, so I've
got
no choice.
The last thought we leave people with
failure
is,
not an option, not giving up. But yeah, exactly. What happens next? And I think to the point of, we spoke a lot about Apostrophy software, but now we actually have this notion of hardware and software together. So what does Aphy start to enable from that perspective based on what you've been building the last couple of years? Because I think what I'm really clear about is when we talk about bringing back BlackBerry, I can get on camera and the mic and wave my hands and say, woo, sign up, let's make this happen. But we never would have even started an initiative like this if we didn't have a plan A that we felt we could deliver a product on to market in 12, 18 months, 24 months, and we could do the work to make something really exciting. So from your perspective, what would be the next steps? If I call you and I'm like, Petter, we did it. We got the licensing deal. Let's get to work.
Well, let's start now. And I think it's also, remember, that kind of brings me into the differences with, of course, we speak about the nostalgia of BB10, etc. I mean, yeah, there are so many similarities. One, the playbook business model. We do as, if you're going to make use of Apostrophe, you have to pay for it, right? Because there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
The other is that we spoke about Switzerland. Of course, that's a thing. Kind of feel Canada, Switzerland.
I feel it was like BlackBerry was Canada, Apple, Android. That's California, that's America. I'm like, maybe the next one should be Switzerland.
Yeah.
Feels right.
So yeah, and then the other thing which is very important for us is how we believe this can go as wide and available for as many people that really want to take back control of the data, is that we license it to other OEMs, i.e. brands, right? So that is super important as a distinction between the good old BlackBerry, other than the technology in Switzerland, but truly that we want that for the hardware makers to actually take part of this and wanting to build around this as, a concerted group of interested party that can.
And there is another party. We've talked about consumers. You touched on OEMs there. There's also enterprise, right? We've been talking a lot about consumers who might be data minded or privacy minded. But I know you've been having a lot of really interesting conversations with CEOs at, some of the most data centric companies. I'm trying not to name names, right?
Yeah.
And also governments around the world. So how does enterprise and government factor into this conversation above and beyond consumer? Like, what's different day to day, and what's the draw for them when it comes to something like Aphy?
Well, yeah, and there's something very BlackBerryan about this as well, right? So it was all enterprise, and then somehow it just came into the hemisphere of consumers. And yeah, what we do see, and especially now, the BlackBerry legacy, the version whatever we are now, Apostrophe is here, and as there are these movements in different shapes and forms, we see so many governments, or the people that are still allowed to ask questions, what's really going on, and can afford to request how can we stop that going on that they don't like? So
Mm-hmm.
governments typically, big enterprise, of course, you can imagine defense is super important. And there's another very important distinction, and that's, I think, is the modernity of Apostrophe versus good old 10, is the transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Every single digit of code is completely transparent. So there's no black box. So you can imagine now, in the context of now, if you're a government and you kind of feel that things are not so comfortable around you, you would probably want to be in control of your mobile telephony infrastructure, the most important communication infrastructure here. You want to that, and you want to know exactly what's going on. That is, again, as fundamentally what we see the interest around the world, every continent.
All sounds really exciting, right? Let's talk brass tacks here for a sec, right? Because there's probably people listening that are like, okay, well, a lot of the building blocks are there. AphyOS, is in contention, probably the leader to be the spiritual successor to BlackBerry from an OS perspective, and delivering on those tenets. Where are we? How far along are we? What's next for Apostrophe?
Yeah. So Kevin mentioned we managed to launch Apostrophe almost 2 years ago. It feels like 100 years ago, and we are soon to launch the second device and new version of Apostrophe, and excitingly, next year we will see 2 more OEMs, so 2 more brands that's going to provide us all with the option to take on their device with their branding and propose a powered by Apostrophe handset.
And because I've had some insider information on this is why, to me, when Jeff and I are rallying ideas back and forth the last few months of what is the most credible plan A for us to execute on, knowing that Apostrophe has been gaining experience in the market, where the roadmap's going, where it's proving itself, and it's not an idea, it's a reality that you can use and benefit from today. That gets me excited, because then when I think about a BlackBerry-ified version of Apostrophe, to me, we become one of those clients of Aphy, but part of what we can do is BlackBerry-ify that experience. So we would ramp up the investment into a UI that feels like a modernized version of the BlackBerry experience people know and love. But again, don't try to replicate the past. Let's do the work to make it better. You would start to lean into building some of those services that are communication and messaging centric, that speak to what I think a BlackBerry user of the past would care about and people today would care about.
We're going to do it in a way that integrates hardware and software, because I think this is one of the things that a lot of people get wrong, is when you slap an operating system onto an OEM device and it's not deeply integrated into the hardware, you're not taking full advantage of the OS, and you're not able to secure it right down to the driver level. It's just like a security veneer that gets applied over top and isn't going to pass muster with some of these people who really care about security and encryption and privacy. And that's one of the things that Aphy's able to do better than anyone else.
Thank you, Jeff, because that is so important. Because you do have to design for platforms. So
Yes.
the hardware there, you can download whatever onto something Android and you can play around with it. Probably not going to work well. If you're really interested, you should. But if you're going to be truly in control, you have to go deep down into the kernel stack and say, are all of these drivers okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do we like them? Do we understand what's going on? Do we understand that why does certain apps have direct access to the deepest level, which it shouldn't have? These are the things that we see when you get, the basic platform for most Android phones. You would be really concerned when you see all the spaghetti going on there.
Yeah, and you can only you can only deliver an experience like that when you're working hardware and software together. And so everything Kevin's talking about, bringing that kind of BlackBerry-ness, it's the result of in-house hardware and software. And that's, quite frankly, part of what makes iOS and iPhone so magical. They own the whole stack. And so if we were to bring back BlackBerry, working with somebody like Aphy, potentially, we could do that and create these magical experiences between hardware and software that make both users happy and people like government and enterprise happy too.
And let's also emphasize the fact that by doing so, by cleaning up the cellar, the dark rooms down there underneath the fundaments of that stack, you're going to be, the dependency of high performance components.
You just took the words out of my mouth. So that's what I want to bring up.
Yeah.
Is like, as I'm listening and I'm putting my OG tech blogger hat on, or I'm listening to the BlackBerry fans who just bring back BlackBerry 10, give me QNX again. QNX was the best. The question I always think about is like, well, why did you like QNX as a customer? And there were some sound bites that, Jeff, you probably were the guy to like write the bullet points and say, let's tell them this. It's like, it's a self-healing OS. It won't crash. It'll fix itself. Oh, it's really efficient on battery life. A lot of those things are absolutely true. And where they're not true in Android GMS is that there's so many millions of lines of code that are just baggage for data extraction. So when you run something like Apostrophe on, I'm going to call it mid-ish level hardware,
Sure.
you get performance and battery life that is the same as some, high-spec Qualcomm chip running Android GMS.
Mm-hmm.
So for all of us who are into our specs and feeds, you need to have a bit of a reset because, I think actually Carl Pei of Nothing Tech has been really strongly advocating for this, where we're all kind of looking at specs individually instead of thinking about it as the performance of the entire vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you think about buying a car, I will never buy a V6. I only want V8s, or I won't buy a 4-cylinder. But the reality is, if I post a 0 to 60 time of, 3 point whatever seconds, and the fuel efficiency is that, and then handles like a dream, and it's lightweight and the best handling thing on the car, you don't not buy it because the engine wasn't to whatever you think is the best at the time. You buy the package. And there's different ways of assessing the package once you go off of Google Android. And I think that's something for everybody listening, where you don't need QNX. You need something that's lightweight underneath and not bogged down by a decade plus of baggage.
Yeah.
Well, heavy baggage.
Yeah.
I think for me, in that analogy, I would say Apostrophe is kind of Porsche 911.
Perfect. So
Okay.
say no more.
See, and that sort of brings, as we start to wrap this up, I think that's part of what we need to do with this movement, Kevin, around Bring Back BlackBerry and introducing concepts like this, because the tech world has just gotten so accustomed to judging products based on their spec sheets.
Yeah.
And we need to be educating that it's the sum of the parts,
100%.
not just looking at the the bill of materials. How do we wrap this up, Kevin? I think this is great. But I've learned in my years in marketing, you always want to leave people wanting more.
Well,
So,
I think there's going to be a lot of questions to this. So what I'd say is, wherever you're listening to this episode, hopefully we've answered some questions. And if you have a takeaway that I want to stick with you, if you're listening, is this isn't just hand waving. We have credible work that's been done for years, building in some ways the spiritual successors to BlackBerry 10. We have been cutting our teeth in the world of hardware. We've been assembling a team, and in regards to even Jeff, myself, our experience, most people have seen a third of what's actually been cooking in the back end. So I think as we wind down 2025 into 2026, this story just gets better and better. And it's not a story because in my head, it's just it's inevitable that we're going to make this happen. So
love it.
once I get that licensing deal, which I won't stop trying for, Petter, I'm calling you, and we will take the work that's happening behind the scenes, plant a ship date, and get to work.
Great.
Petter, thanks for joining us. I always love spending time with you. Your passion, for what you're doing is just palpable and really exciting. So if people want to learn more about Apostrophe OS or Punkt, which we didn't talk about, which we'll have to have you back to talk about that, where can people go?
Well, apostrophe with y.ch, ch being Swiss domain.
Amazing.
That feels like, why? I don't understand. This is a Canadian in me. I'm like, how does the .ch equal Switzerland?
Don't
But
ask questions.
don't ask questions. I'm just going to nod. Let's buy the .com too, okay?
Kevin, where can people go to learn more about the movement and about what you're up to?
Definitely go to bringbackblackberry.com. Sign up for our petition to bring back BlackBerry if you haven't yet. And follow at Bring Back BlackBerry on Instagram and Facebook. And if you want to follow kind of the behind the scenes, because we'll never spam you once you sign up to the petition, maybe maximum two messages a month. Follow at CrackBerry Kevin. So that's my handle across all the platforms. And a lot of this is on LinkedIn because I like actually meeting the people and connecting with the people and knowing who you are versus the random usernames on every other platform. But I appreciate those too and in all the places. So find me on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, etc.
Amazing.
Do we do our sign off now, Jeff? It's good. We already said it this episode. This isn't nostalgia. It's necessity.
And we're going to bring back BlackBerry.
Or die trying.
All right. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time.